The horror game genre has really changed over the past few years, going away from AAA developed action-based horror games to going with an independent developer feel, with a lot of new and interesting concepts along the way. The whole chased genre has really picked up with the likes of the independent release Slender and Outlast, and even some more creative ideas like the Five Nights at Freddy's series. We've also seen the likes of PT, which was the playable teaser for Silent Hills, going in quite a different direction than we usually saw with the particular series. But now there's a newly released horror game for the PlayStation 4 that was released back in summer of 2015 on Steam. It's called Kholat, and it takes place on a deserted, snow-filled mountain. But is this game enough to chill you to the bone, or should it just be buried under an avalanche of snow? Unlike most horror games, Kholat actually uses a real-life event to form its narrative, based on the Dyatlov Pass incident, which took place in Russia in the late 1950s, featuring a group of experienced ski hikers going up into the mountains from an institute and ended up dying under mysterious circumstances. The incident was never fully resolved, and no one quite knows what exactly happened to the hikers, other than their bodies were discovered with massive amounts of weird and interesting injuries that just didn't quite add up. Kholat uses that initial narrative and ends up forming a storyline around it that actually sounded quite intriguing when I first initially started playing the game. Kholat's gameplay is very similar to other horror games like Slender, Outlast, and a little bit like PT. It's almost a walking simulator, but not quite. Walking simulator being the kind of game like PT or Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, where there's no way to really fail and there's no actual death to your character. But there actually is death, as you're being chased by this weird mirage-like smoke creature throughout the game in various different areas, and if it runs into you, you end up getting a game over and have to go back to wherever the game last auto-saved you. You can also die from falling off the cliff of the mountain or falling into traps like pits filled with spikes that are there for, well, mysterious reasons, I guess. The game is broken up into 3 acts, though Act 1 and 3 are basically your intro and epilogue to the game's overall story, with Act 2 being the bulk of the major gameplay. You start off the game in kind of a small little town-like setting. I guess your character ended up getting off a train that's located nearby, and then after exploring a little bit, you'll eventually find yourself in a blinding blizzard, finding a small tent, and moving on to Act 2. From that point on, you emerge from your tent, you have a compass and a map, and that's it. The game doesn't give you express directions on where you should or shouldn't go, so it's up to you to kind of explore, which I'm sure many gamers will actually enjoy. You're just left on this mountain to kind of figure out exactly what had happened. As you start to explore the mountain, you'll probably run into one of the game's many landmarks. The landmarks hold notes that are the important notes to the overall game. Once you've found all the landmarks and all the notes at the landmarks, then you're able to actually complete the game's storyline. Though there are plenty of other notes spread out throughout the game, and in order to get the best ending, you'll have to explore the entire mountain and find every single note that's laid across. You'll know you're at one of these landmarks because that's when the cool bits of the game actually happen. Most of the rest of the mountain is just kind of bland. It's snow-covered, it's a mountain, it's icy, I get it. But when you make it to one of these landmarks is where the game actually shines. Whether it's this kind of hunter's cabin with all kinds of weird stuff that happens as you end up entering it. You'll walk up a mountain with all these torches start to light the more and more you climb up it. You'll find a cave system that you have to explore with a whole bunch of candles and it looks like ritual stuff set up. You'll find a weird throne and a creepy looking tree, and potentially one of my favorite moments in the game, the bunker. The bunker contains definitely one of the coolest, most trippy parts of the entire game. Though I don't want to spoil too much about the game or any of the locations of anything because, well, that's really the gameplay. Also, throughout exploring the mountain, you're going to find coordinates located on rocks or on the ground or various other places. They give you the coordinates of the particular landmarks and the notes that you're looking for, though you have to find them before you end up adding them to your map. You can then look at your map and see which coordinates that are currently found, and once you have found a landmark, it will cross that coordinate out. So that's really the only kind of way you can tell how many notes you've collected and which of the locations you haven't explored yet. As far as the horror goes in the game, it is mostly based around kind of the immersion of trying to get in there. The game does an okay job with its sound effects to kind of rev up the creepiness or scary factor, but a lot of times it ended up playing the same sound effects so many times it just became boring. Especially the howling of wolves randomly. You never see any wolves or really any animal throughout the entire mountain, but you're constantly gonna hear the howling of the wolves. The whole scary elements, when you finally get into one of those cool landmark moments, the game really shines and it can be really kind of creepy, especially the bunker and a few other key moments. But overall, most of the time I was just getting bored walking around the mountain, feeling like I was going in a circle until eventually, oh, okay, I didn't go down this path. Oh, nope, there's finally something. Yay, okay. Listen to the story and then progress. The story told throughout the game is quite cool. There is some really cool stuff going on and you're never quite sure what the end result ends up being. It's kind of like left to your mind to kind of piece everything together, which I definitely like and appreciate. The problem is just the overall package of the game is boring, at least to me. I'm sure there are going to be definitely some people out there who are going to get really scared and really creeped out by the overall atmosphere, but for me, I got really bored of walking on the mountain within the first 20 minutes of playing the game. And the game is incredibly short, going at about, took me 2.5 hours in order to find all the notes and then be able to get the ending to the game. The controls in the game are okay, my biggest issue being with the run button. You have to hold in the left stick in order to run, which happens in a lot of games, but you really have to press the L3 button down in order for the game to recognize your run, and you're unable to change any of the controls in the control options. Besides the running, you can also kind of zoom in and look a little bit closer up. You can pull out a flashlight, your compass, which is very, very valuable. Not only, of course, is it pointing in the direction that you're going, but it also will shake when any of the evil spirits are nearby, so that you know you may potentially run into something very quickly, so you may want to get out of that area. Kholat is one of those games I really, really wanted to love. The story based on an actual event that I immediately started researching and reading as the game was downloading on my PS4, and I was really kind of pumped for the game. I stayed up all night last night playing through the game, and honestly, it was putting me to sleep on quite a few occasions. Eventually, I was able to kind of figure out where I needed to go and take that next step to make the game at least somewhat more intriguing, but by the end, I was yawning more than I was actually enjoying it. It has some nice visuals, but the game stutters at points with some really bad frame rate drops. I'm not going to say it was anything that was so massive that it ended up making me want to just quit the game, but at some of the points where it should be really scary, it just ended up chugging. There was also a lot of texture popping, especially if you ended up having to use a checkpoint to continue your game. Once it loaded back up from a previous death, the textures were all kind of those bland, plain textures and then finally slowly started to pop in, which also just kind of took me out of the overall experience. Overall, Kholat's not a terrible horror game. It has some nice visuals and has a few moments that really shine, but other than that, it's kind of a dull, boring overall game. It's actually much better to kind of just read up on the story from the game. If I could just get all the notes kind of set up so I could just read them, you'll probably get an overall better experience of just reading all the notes from the game than actually playing through it. In the end though, I'm going to be giving Kholat a 4 out of 10. It's $19.99, currently available on the PlayStation Network. It's been available on Steam since summer of 2015, and honestly, there are a lot better horror games you can get for that same exact price, even on the PlayStation 4. But anyway, guys, that'll wrap up this review of Kholat for the PS4. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.